recourse, sir. How can I help you?
Good morning. I am trying to find out who is responsible for administering disciplinary action against the clerk of courts.
That is a good question.
Isn't it,
Give
though?
me, right, give me just a second. Let me see.
All right. Thank you.
How many holding for?
Hello?
Is there somebody in the holding for, sir?
Yes, I called the Indiana offices of court services.
Yes.
I was trying to find out in regards to who would be responsible for administering a disciplinary action or overseeing disciplinary proceedings for a clerk of court.
I don't know if there's anybody. The clerk is an elected position.
Right. Now, my question would be based upon the public information I can locate. There's an order adopting Administrative Rule 20, filed under cause number 94S00-1602-MS-86 in the Indiana Supreme Court. This was filed on September 2nd, 2016 at 3:51 p.m. With the Indiana Supreme Court, Court of Appeals, and Tax Court Clerk. However, long story short, there's a minor quotation here that I'm looking at that says the Indiana Supreme Court and Chief Justice have inherent authority under the Indiana Constitution and Indiana Code 33-24-6-9 to appoint and assign personnel necessary for the court's operations. The court also has a constitutional duty and authority to supervise the exercise of jurisdiction by the courts under Indiana Constitutional Article 7, Statute 4. So it would seem that the Indiana Supreme Court is the only entity responsible for the clerk of courts, and I'm just sort of curious. It says a constitutional duty to supervise the exercise of jurisdiction by the other courts. That seems to be squarely what I'm talking about, ma'am.
Well, the Supreme Court, we have, let me explain to you what we have. We have within the Supreme Court an entity to discipline judges. We have with the Supreme Court an entity to discipline attorneys.
But the clerk is able to just run around willy-nilly doing whatever she wants. That seems to be what everybody's telling me.
And to my knowledge, that is because the clerk is an elected position, and the Supreme Court oversees the runnings by the judges who have sworn to act under it.
So whose jurisdiction would the clerk of court be operating under when she is providing court services?
The clerk's office.
Who? So she's her own.
Because the judge, okay, like for instance, let's say Marion County. Okay, every judge.
How about we talk about LaPorte County? Because Marion County is kind of specific with their stuff being that it's the capital. I live in LaPorte County, so we can use that one as an example if you'd like.
For LaPorte County, each judge is elected every 6 years.
Right.
In terms of 6-year terms.
Now, my question would be.
They're appointed, but the LaPorte County, you vote for your court clerk.
Right, we vote for our judges too. However,
right.
I can file a complaint on a judge under the Indiana rules of judicial responsibility and such.
Against the judge, because of the oath they're upholding that's based on the Supreme. Yeah.
Right. So.
To my knowledge, because there isn't because the Supreme Court clerk, like the clerk of the clerk of those, the clerk works for the Supreme Court. To my knowledge, is not over the clerks in every county clerk. It's kind of like a sheriff doesn't answer to anybody except for like a sheriff. If you have a county sheriff, that's an elected position. There's nobody who technically is over the state police. Still
Well, you see,
oversee
that's
the
the
sheriff.
thing, ma'am, is the coroner can arrest the sheriff for,
Right,
if the
right, but
sheriff
the
gets
state
all
police don't
willy-nilly.
oversee, yeah, but the state
So
police don't oversee the sheriff.
my question would be, when I read, the court also has a constitutional duty and authority to supervise the exercise of jurisdiction by the other courts, I read that to be something similar to the way that every fireman at my local fire department is a designee of the Indiana Fire Marshal. So every single fireman in the state of Indiana, all 92 counties, work under the authority of the Indiana State Fire Marshal. That's one person who's responsible for every fireman's disciplinary procedure. In effect, there's a long chain of command to get from the bottom to the top, but long story short, he oversees all of them. That's kind of the way that this language here reads.
If there was an entity who would do that, because, like I said, we have an entity to discipline judges. It's not the Chief Justice. The Chief Justice, it's a separate entity, completely different. It's a disciplinary commission. It's a judicial qualifications commission. It's not a person.
So, all right. So,
like the attorneys is not a person. It's a disciplinary commission. My best guess to get a more concrete answer to something maybe we are not known to, if I can give you the number for the Supreme Court clerk, and they may know.
No, they told me to call you. My question would be, so what I'm hearing is that the entirety of Indiana's justice system fails to meet a single person's due process because you cannot file a complaint against the clerk based upon their activities. Is that what we're saying here? That a constitutionally elected position, you do realize that okay, so every other elected constitutional position, auditor, sheriff, coroner, all these other people have a process. Every single one of them have a process for removal from office and to file a complaint against them. So what I'm hearing is the clerk of courts is some sort of magical entity that just does whatever it wants, and nobody can question them. The clerk of courts is above reprieve. Is that about right?
No, I mean, as far as I know.
Would the Indiana commercial courts have a number? I presume that this would be a commercial matter, since she is using my right of publicity and my identifying information to obtain a profit fraudulently. I presume this is a commercial matter that I could just go after her bond then, right? Is there a court in Indiana that would hear a constitutional challenge for a constitutionally elected officer that's not the Indiana Supreme Court?
Federal court. Hold on just one moment.
All right.
Don't forward. What do you want me to tell you?
I'm sorry, you're talking to me? Hello, ma'am? Well, I'm still holding if you can hear me.
So I'm sorry about that. I had to ask around to a couple of people,
All right.
and
Not a problem.
nobody knows of a way to do it
No?
in our office.
In all of the state of Indiana's legal knowledge, nobody has figured out a way to.
Nobody whom I could find had an answer. Hold on just one more second. All right, a second opinion.
All right.
We are fairly confident that the best you can do for that elected position is to complain to the county council or county commissioners, or look into the process of impeaching elected officials. But that to their knowledge, there is nobody on the state level who oversees it.
So I presume then that the Indiana State Supreme Court's clerk of office definitely doesn't have anybody that oversees them, right?
They're overseen by the Supreme Court. So you could talk to the court, the judges in the county.
All right, so who oversees all the attorneys in the state of Indiana?
Oversees as in what? Who makes sure they keep their license?
Yeah, because it would appear to me that every attorney in the state of Indiana swears an oath to the Indiana Constitution, and they're operating under the authority of the Indiana Supreme Court, not all the local courts. And the same thing would basically apply to all the judges as well. I'm just sort of curious, is the clerk of court, what constitution is the clerk of court swearing an oath to? More importantly, why is it that when the clerk of courts, when the clerk has a bond, like a public official bond, why is it payable to the state of Indiana? If they
It would be probably payable to the Secretary of State's office, because since they handle all the elections and all of that, and they're the ones who issue the oaths that are taken. It would be my guess, because they do all the elections.
Oh, no, yeah, the clerks do the elections too. So it's like the clerks could literally
The Secretary of
fake
State
an
oversees it
election
all.
and nobody would even be able to challenge it. That's very strange.
Yes, so to my knowledge, from the people I've asked in our office, we don't know of any state entity that oversees the individually elected county clerks.
Oh, man.
Everyone says that you could go to the commissioners.
It would seem that the commissioners are just responsible for providing the office for the clerk.
That's the 4 or 5 different people I've asked in the office, and what I have now been told previously.
Yeah, that's like a
is
physical
not one
building.
person that oversits it. There is not one person that oversees the individual county clerks.
So, as of this date and time, I would be correct in my statement if I said that the clerk's office is above reprieve.
I don't believe they're above reprieve. I just don't know where to direct you.
Well, I mean, I'm just a normal guy. You know what I mean? I'm not an attorney or anything. That's why I called the Indiana Supreme Court. I figured surely the Indiana Supreme Court would have some sort of answers, because they treat, what the clerk of courts type up and stuff as like the truth. And I'm just sort of wondering, how do I officially call the clerk of courts a liar? And there doesn't seem to be a process. So my next step would be, do you know if the Indiana Commercial Courts has a phone number? Would they be responsible for this? Because it would seem I'm incurring damages, and there is no administrative remedy for me to exhaust, which means I could pretty much just go straight to my claim, right?
The commercial courts, there's a handful of commercial courts in Indiana.
Yeah. And it says that it doesn't specifically apply to anybody who's part of the judicial system, which the clerk of courts doesn't seem to be any of those things that would eliminate her from the Indiana commercial courts. So again, my question would be, do they have a number? Maybe I can pose my question over there.
No, because they're made up of different people across the state. So there's not a specific phone number.
Would I be appropriate to file my claim in the Lake County commercial courts, being that I live in LaPorte County and I'm not that far away, or would there be in a more appropriate venue?
That may be the case, because there are only so many commercial courts across the state. My best suggestion to that would be to call Lake County and ask if they are taking cases from other counties.
Oh, so they could quite possibly refuse to even hear this.
Well, but I know that because there are only so many, because it's still being piloted. It's still, there's only a handful of commercial courts that operate in the state right now.
Okay. Yeah, that was my understanding as well, is that they could deny accepting it, which would again place me back to square one, where there is no remedy for this, and essentially, this is amazing. So it would seem that what you guys are telling me is that the entire Indiana judicial process is in violation of the normal person's due process rights, because there is no real way to challenge an action taken by the clerk of courts, because apparently whatever constitution she's swearing an oath to, even though the Indiana Supreme Court is the entity that has the jurisdiction over that for literally every single other constitutionally elected position, it miraculously doesn't apply to the clerk's office. I mean, I just want to thank you, because I'm like a citizen journalist. And I mean, this is like literally the biggest story ever, is that like the entire system is literally not broken, but fixed against the normal person. Because basically, bottom line, the clerk can just violate your due process rights and there is no remedy. That's absolutely astounding.
Nobody knows of a way within our court, within our agency, to file a complaint against the court.
I mean, if you don't know of one, you don't know of one. That's great.
Right, and like I said, I have asked multiple people. Nobody knows
So,
of a way within our agency.
Who would be responsible for arresting me in that office? Since
we don't have anybody.
No. I mean, in the clerk of courts, whose jurisdiction is that? Like, let's say the clerk of courts lets something sit on her desk that I filed for like 3 months, and then she lets something else sit on her desk for like 6 months, and then she does it over. And this is like a repetitive theme, and I just get tired of hearing her say that stuff sat on her desk and she forgot about it. And I decide to walk into her office, hop that counter, and defecate on her desk to prove a point, and ask her just how long it's going to take her to deal with that. Who would have jurisdiction for arresting me for that?
Probably one of the sheriffs.
The sheriff?
Probably, I would assume a county, somebody who works for the county sheriff's department. But I don't know.
What if
I don't know.
I'm thinking I got diplomatic immunity or some sort of weird, like international waters. Seems very strange that the sheriff would handle that.
But I don't know. I have no idea who would arrest you out of a clerk's office. I know a courtroom is typically the bailiff.
I suppose there's only one way to find out, huh?
I wish I had a better answer for you, sir, but we just don't know of any entity to complain to.
I wish that I didn't literally have to think about walking into a clerk's office and taking a shit on her desk to get some sort of court addressal of this. But, I mean, that seems to be more logical than calling the Supreme Court and asking at this point, so... yeah, I mean, I got some cases I was going to try to get transferred to you guys, but I mean, shit, what's the point? Anyway, you have a lovely day, ma'am. It was a very enlightening conversation. I fully anticipated you guys would have some sort of an answer. And, I made 5-10 minutes of resistance, but eventually you'd come back with some sort of Indiana code, or rule of procedure that governs this. But flat out, we don't know. I mean,
I'm sorry.
thank you, ma'am. You made my day. Have a good one.